Saghafi, Liberty Home Mortgage, and the topic today, how bad does bankruptcy affect you when you're buying a home? Okay, how much does it affect you? Bankruptcy affects you a lot, of course, okay? So when it comes to bankruptcy, the thing you have to pay attention to is there's something called a waiting period, all right? When you go bankrupt, you file the bankruptcy. When you file the bankruptcy, that's the start of the bankruptcy. When it gets discharged, that's when it's closed and done and finished, okay? For all mortgage loan types, there's something called a waiting period. The waiting period is the time from the discharge of the bankruptcy until you can qualify for a loan. Now, there's two different types of bankruptcies that my industry looks at. One is a Chapter 7, which is a complete liquidation of all of your debt. That's a fancy way to say you don't pay anything back, okay? Then there's a Chapter 13. The Chapter 13 is, the polite way to say it is, it's a restructuring of your debt. What the trustee of the court does, appointed by the court, is they look at all of your debt, they come up with a new payment structure and a payment schedule. They debit your paychecks over 3 or 5 years, and they pay back a portion of all the debt you owe, and then it's discharged. So Chapter 13 takes a long time to discharge, 3 to 5 years. A Chapter 7 takes 4 to 6 months, typically. I'm sure, once again, there's exceptions to the rule. Who knows what happens? I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, for God's sakes. But as far as qualifying for a mortgage, the other thing to pay attention to is that the biggest negative factor on your credit, or one of the biggest, is a late payment on your mortgage, a late payment on installment loans, late payments on credit cards, and public records, such as bankruptcies. Bankruptcies are placed in the public record, okay, so it's public. I can't say they go on television with a bullhorn and say you went bankrupt, but it's public record, and it goes onto your credit report. So on your credit report, there's a section in there called public records, and the bankruptcy will show up there. Now, everybody always says this to me. They'll say, Khash, like, it's supposed to come off after 7 years. I've had people say, Khash, that bankruptcy, I'm done with it. It's coming off in the next year. And I say, when did you file bankruptcy or whatever it is? Oh, it was just 2 years ago. Well, no. For like FHA, for example, you have to be 2 years from the discharge date of Chapter 7 to qualify. That means you're eligible to possibly qualify. That doesn't mean you qualify. That means you're eligible to possibly qualify, but it doesn't come off of your credit. Bankruptcies stay on your credit for 10 years. Listen to that number again. It stays on your credit for 10 years. So the bankruptcy, when you file it, claim it, it's going to, well, when you file it, it's going to hammer down your credit score. Your score is going to drop a lot. If you sat here and said, Khash, how much is going to affect my score? I can tell you this one. I could tell you that from what I've seen of 24 years of doing this lovely job, people who have filed for bankruptcy, within the first year of it, their scores are probably in the 4s and 5s. If they've walked the straight and narrow, managed their debt, reestablished some credit, 2 years after the discharge, a lot of times I've seen it in the mid 600s. So if you go bankrupt today, it takes Chapter 7, let's just say it takes 4 to 6 months to discharge. And from the time it discharges, you open up some new credit cards. And that's gigantically important. You got to remember, in order to rebuild your credit, you have to open up new trade lines. I've had some people say, Khash, I'm not opening up any credit cards. That's what got me into this mess. I'm not doing it again. I'm done with credit. That sounds great. And I truly applaud you for being so disciplined and actually understanding that you have to pay attention to your finances, and hopefully whatever got you into trouble in the first place, you don't get into trouble again with it. However, you'll never be able to rebuild your score. You have to be able to rebuild your credit score, okay? So to do that, you have to open up new credit, reestablish it, pay it on time for 1 to 2 years at least, and then your score will start rebounding. So how much does it affect you? Does a bankruptcy affect you in buying a home? You have a waiting period after the discharge of the bankruptcy. Check with whatever lender you're talking to for which loan you're going for. Every different loan type, conventional, VA, FHA, USDA, those loan types have specific waiting periods. The waiting period is different, whether it's a Chapter 7 or it's a Chapter 13, depending on one of those two. But pay attention to the waiting periods. That's how it affects you. So if you do go bankrupt, pay attention to it, get copies of your credit. Watch my other videos, because I have videos on which websites should you go to monitor your credit, get copies of your credit, and go through that whole drill there. But You got to be subscribed to my YouTube page and share this on your page so others could learn and see it. We'll catch you on the next one.